I am really thrilled to introduce our moderator for this panel, Josh Hairston, a 2014 graduate of Duke's Trinity College and former member of the Duke men's basketball team. Josh is now venture partner at EONXI and in player representation at Go Sports Management. Josh, a huge thank you to you and our panelists for being here. It's all yours.
Thank you, Caitlin. I appreciate it. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for putting on this amazing event. This is definitely long overdue, and I am very grateful to be a part of it, and I look forward to being a part of it when we can all meet in person. I'm very excited about the conversation that I'm having today with two incredible people. The first being Laura Gentile of ESPN and Mike Levine of CAA Sports. Laura is a former field hockey star and Trinity alumnus of 1994, serves as ESPN's Senior Vice President of Marketing and Social Media. And Mike is a creative arts agency, otherwise known as CAA, board member and the co-head of CAA Sports, a division of leading entertainment of the sports industry. How are the both of you guys today?
Good.
Good.
It's good to see you guys again.
Thanks.
Likewise. Thanks for having us, Josh.
Of course, and I think this will be a fun conversation. So the topic of today obviously is marketing, but we wanted to focus more on how athletes use brands and social media to amplify their voices and messages. And I think now in today's age, with the growth of social media and just the growth of overall voices being heard and those voices wanting to be heard, that this is going to be a great discussion. So I have a question to start off for the both of you. The question is, given both of your experiences as student athletes, Laura competing in field hockey and Vino playing lacrosse, what were some of the biggest takeaways from your transition to the business side of sports?
Well, in the spirit of ladies, chivalry not being dead, Laura, please start us off.
I was hoping you'd say that, Mike. Yeah, I think it's super applicable. I mean, Josh, you should probably also answer this question because I know the moderators don't always get to talk, but super applicable. I mean, just in terms of the competitiveness and the competitive fire you need to have, certainly the ability to manage teams, of course. I mean, it's kind of the number one thing I do all day is interact with my team and talk to various leaders across the company and make sure we're all on the same page and we're all communicating. And I look back at some of my time at Duke and I wish I had done more of that. You know, I wasn't as vocal, perhaps as a leader and as a captain as I could have been. And I learned from that. And I really try to apply it at work and nip issues in the bud and not let things fester. I think the thing I miss the most though is business is not as black and white as sports. You know, like I always used to think I could, you know, work harder than everybody else and be as more dedicated than somebody else and I'll achieve and we'll put victories on the board. And I think in business, you know, that's a little hazier and it's not a direct correlation. And so you have to build even more resilience to keep fighting each and every day.
Of course.
It's interesting that you said that because as a salesperson, I do think that those same aspects of the work you're putting in does yield results. And I agree with your perspective on the transition. I think that when I'm looking at candidates and I see that they were a collegiate athlete or they were a member of the military, I see things that they did as athletes or as members of the service that really apply perfectly to our business. It's a team sports environment. And I think that in business, you learn to play the role just like you have to when you're on a team. And you may not always be the best player, but it doesn't mean you can't contribute. And I think that so many of the principles that we all built and took away from the time when we were student athletes really translates into the business world. I think so much of the challenges of a fast moving business world today is time management and how you handle efficiencies and figure out how to prioritize. Because in college, when you're an athlete, you have your studies, you have your role in the team and your workouts, and then you want to have fun. And you need time for all of those things. And life is not any different the things you're choosing may be different. It's family, it's your work, it's your personal time, it's hobbies. But again, those lessons of managing the time during a school year and during the week translate perfectly to the workforce.
I mean, I agree with both of you. For myself, obviously, I'm new to the business world and new in the business space. So when I was transitioning from my time playing to getting where I am now, there was almost a sense of not fear, but it was definitely nervousness to where I didn't know what it would translate like. And once I got into it, I realized that it's very similar to sports. And Laura, like you were saying, it's not as black and white, but the competitiveness, the drive, the wanting to work and be the best at whatever you're doing. And that's kind of the approach that I've taken as well. And so I appreciate, that was both grateful insight from the both of you. Mike, this is directed more towards you. Laura, definitely if you have something that you want to add, please do so. But Mike, with Michael Jordan serving as a pioneer for individual athletes promoting themselves among team sports, how do you see sports marketing evolving as today's athletes build their own personal brands across social media and other platforms?
Yeah, I mean, you said it right there with the way you asked the question. The athlete and celebrity generally is in closer proximity and more direct touch with their fan base and the audience broadly than they ever were, even during Michael Jordan's era. I think one of the things that make Michael Jordan so special, in addition to the way he played, was the aura of the greatness, right? The mystery and the sort of distance that he had from fans. It was almost like he was untouchable. I think what's amazing about today's mega stars, and whether that's a LeBron or a Kobe, or others at their level, is that they've managed to maintain the aura, but also still gain proximity through the lens of social media, which has sort of proven to be a bullshit detector to some degree. You really can't fake who you are through social media. I think that people are savvy enough these days where they can see through phoniness. And I think that Dwayne Wade and Donovan Mitchell and Chris Paul and some of those guys are more beloved because they're human, because they're authentic, and because they show their true selves, even their vulnerabilities. And LeBron, has done an amazing job in a fishbowl since he was in 8th grade, maintaining his greatness in public eye. So for me, I think that people lose sight of how hard that all is to do. And if you're not being yourself and you're not authentic, then eventually it's going to catch up to you, and people will catch on for your being fraudulent.
Of course. Laura, would you like to add anything?
I would just simply add that, you look at guys like MJ and even Tiger, where they were closely kind of manicured persona, right? Everything seemed perfect, and they never very rarely said things out of turn or that were controversial. And it was a very manicured persona. Whereas, to Mike's point, it's really raw and authentic. And I think a lot of the athletes like it that way too. They want to have a voice and have a perspective, whether it's on social justice or other things. So it's definitely a whole new aspect of marketing and working with athletes. But I think it's for the best, because you really get to know these people and you could really admire them for the right reasons, as opposed to a fairy tale.
Yeah, and I'm sure, sorry to interrupt, Josh, but I bet you Laura can recall the way I feel like in the sports management side of things and in sports media, in the early days of social, we wanted to maintain the manicured lawn. We wanted it to still remain perfect. And we were worried that social media was going to be this place that was going to ruin people's images and expose them. And frankly, it was such a runaway train that no matter what any of us wanted to do, we couldn't hold it back. And thankfully, the guys crushed it. I mean, they were themselves, and people loved them for it, because it actually made them more relatable and more human. And I think that's what's really so incredible about social media, is that you can actually get a sense of who someone really is off the court or off the field by following them closely through their social outlets.
I 100% agree. I think social media, that's the biggest thing, right? Not only is it a voice, but it also makes these larger than life figures seem human, and that you can have a connection with them and you can connect and have that insight into their lives. Obviously, they're showing us what they want to be seen, but at the same time, it is opening those doors to where, obviously I grew up in the 90s. Don't really remember watching MJ play with the Bulls early in his career, but I do remember obviously his time with the Wizards. And just from what my father has told me was, MJ, just much to your point, Laura, MJ was very silent. You really didn't, it was almost that aura of, not knowing what he was doing all the time, which kind of made it so magical. And then you have a guy like LeBron James, who, like you said, was in a fishbowl since he's been 18 years old. And, these guys just let us into their lives every single day. So I think that's the beautiful part of it. Thank you guys for that. Laura, this is definitely directed towards you. And one thing that I forgot to address is that you were instrumental in the launch of espnW, which is huge for ESPN. And so this question is centered around that. What role does social media play in espnW's mission to uplift female athletes? How has the evolving marketing landscape focused on social media and digital strategies changed espnW since the foundation in 2010?
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, W was really founded to be a digital property. When we created it, we wanted to basically travel with women and be with them at all times. We never aspired. It's funny because in the early days, people were like, well, don't you want a linear network for women's sports? And it just didn't seem like a winning model. And I think that's being borne out in that creating yet one more linear network was not kind of where the future was going. And so the notion of being more ubiquitous on digital and having a huge social presence was a part of the original vision. And we're still, working on it, and we're still trying to, continue to grow the audience and be relevant. But I think if anything, just being where women are at all times and not expecting appointment viewing and for them to sit on their couch at a certain time, it just seemed antithetical to where we were going. But like Zach said in the previous panel, and that's one nice thing about Zoom, a guy like Zach's talking and you can look directly into his closet. And now you can see Mike's, golfing trophies. It does make it all more intimate. But like Zach said, you got to kind of see the blind spots and see where there's openings and gaps. And there was no media platform for female athletes that focused on female athletes and that spoke directly to women as consumers. So we still have a long way to go. But that's kind of the genesis of W, was nobody was telling these stories and nobody was speaking in the sports landscape directly to women. And actually nobody really has taken up the charge. There's no other media company doing it. But social media has been critical for us. But like we talked about, it's critical to ESPN, to be more relevant and to be younger.
Of course. And I guess this is more of a selfish question on my end. Can I ask you, what was the process like getting espnW started? What was it like getting it off the ground?
Yeah, in hindsight, I think about it, and I was a bit naive about how hard it would be. But again, that naivete served me well, because maybe if I knew that it was really moving a rock uphill, I might not have done it. And I'm so glad I did. But the process was really basically being an entrepreneur within a large company, and really having to prove yourself and prove you had a business plan and proved you have sponsors that would be interested, and proving truly that you are filling a void. So I tell the story of, we created a business plan, we created the deck where I'm talking to anybody who will listen to me, literally anybody, sharing this deck that in hindsight I'd probably be embarrassed about. But when it got greenlit, I was like, all right, I need, 12 to 15 people to really make this something. And they're like, okay, here's 5. So I should have known right there that it was going to be hard. But Josh, I think this, like when you love something and you're passionate about something, I just didn't think it was going to fail. Like I was like, this has to work on some level because there's a void and nobody should do it but ESPN, and again, speak to female sports fans a bit differently. And importantly, tell the stories of female athletes. But yeah, it was essentially being an entrepreneur within a larger company. And essentially for about 2 years, we were kind of left alone to figure it out, which was super important. Because if people were banging on us and trying to change our trajectory right out of the gate, that would have been hard. But ultimately, you know, we coalesced around a vision and a plan and had time to get going.
Of course, and I understand exactly what you mean when you feel passionate about something. You know, you never feel like it's going to fail. So we appreciate that for sure. Mike, this next one is for you. How do you expect sports marketing to change with the NIL, the name, image, and likeness legislation? What will be the role of CAA sports in this new environment?
It's a great question. If you don't mind, I'm going to come back to it. I didn't want to interrupt, but I did want to tell everybody, just to put a feather in Laura's cap, you know, it is about female athletes, but it's also been an incredible outlet and resource for female executives in our industry. And, you know, having a couple of hundred women working for us in CAA sports, many of whom have attended Laura's events, I can tell you firsthand how important that's been to all of them and their growth and their careers, and how much empowerment and inspiration and strength they're getting from being around their peers and learning, you know, the way that Laura and the team at ESPN have exposed them to. So really important that you blaze that path. Name, image, and likeness, so important, so long overdue, frankly. I've been pretty loudly advocating for paying our athletes for their role in the ecosystem. I can't remember exactly what the question was, but I think you wanted to know how CAA was going to fit into that. Yes. Great question. You know, we are a business that was built to advocate for stars and celebrities and athletes, and that will always be in our DNA and at our core. So we will always be doing that. We are unclear exactly what the landscape is going to look like based on how the legislation will come down. And I think that you can bet that we as an agency will be involved to make sure that athletes that we're working with are well compensated and taken care of and protected the way we protect all the clients that we represent.
Of course. Laura, would you like to add anything on NIL?
I just wish NIL was a topic when I was in college, because I'm sure there would have been a lot of demand for my jersey. I missed out on like $10.
You want to know, Mike, this is, I feel like all of us, especially sports fans and especially as collegiate sports fans, it's been something that, like you said, has been long overdue. I share this story all the time, and the guy I'm going to tell the story about is actually going to be speaking later, Nolan Smith, who was a teammate of mine, captain, just an overall great human being. Nolan, when we were in school, I literally tell people this all the time. If Nolan would have been able to make money, he would have made millions of dollars just off of his personality alone and just the type of guy he is. I mean, they call him the mayor of Durham for a reason. He is just all over the place and is just, he's literally a marketing machine. And it's good now that obviously, you know, we had opinions and voices about it back then when I was playing, but now you see these young men and women who are going out there, you know, wearing these not NCAA property shirts, who are going out there and, you know, expressing how they feel and demanding change. And hopefully the NCAA wakes up and can have this conversation, because it is long overdue. And I mean, you know, these athletes, you know, yes, we get free education. And of course, that's nothing that we're going to look down upon. But at the same time, you know, a lot of these guys can make money that can help take care of their family, and they bring in so much money for the schools that I definitely think it's a conversation that needs to be had and something that needs to change. So
yeah, and Josh, just on that, I just, you know, really hope it's a healthy conversation, because you can do this in a productive way. I really believe, you know, if you have the right business people or you have the right folks at the table, I think you can really figure this out in a healthy way, and it doesn't have to be an us versus them, which is kind of what it feels like, and doesn't feel like people are listening. But it's the future of collegiate sports, frankly, because if this doesn't work out, the house may fall, right?
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at what the NBA has done with the G League and with their Ignite program. I know Overtime is going to be doing some special things for elite athletes, and you see what's happened in college football. I think that most people lose sight of the fact that the NCAA really doesn't play a role in what we all know as college football, other than as a rule enforcement agency. The conferences really drive college football, and the NCAA has its hold with March Madness, but I think they really need to be careful to get this right. Otherwise, they risk really becoming obsolete and nothing more than a rules enforcement agency.
Right.
I agree. Especially like what Laura said, it's like if we don't figure this out now, then the house may fall. So definitely. Thank you guys both for that. Laura, this is directed towards you. How have you adapted your marketing strategy to cater to the younger generations of fans through changing media mediums?
Well, at ESPN, when we're really functioning well, marketing is content and content is marketing, and we're all on the same page. And as we talked about, not only focusing more on social media and making that more of a priority for our growth. Like, it's us and Netflix added the most TikTok users in the last year. And that's a really, as you know, valuable audience for us. It's also 47% female, which is a good thing for us. But also just digital, our commitment to digital media, in general. I think that sometimes gets overlooked at ESPN, right? We have this app that literally 1.4 billion minutes were spent on the app in February. Like, it's crazy. In a month, 1.4 billion minutes. And then digital, in a given month, we reach upwards of 90 million fans. So for us, continuing to focus on, again, how to be super relevant on social media, how to use digital to reach people anytime, anywhere, and give them what they want, and whether it's original content or whether it's highlights or whether it's stats and information and great articles, we're just constantly looking at that. But I think another key way is certainly through music. It's something, our president, Jimmy Patero, and our marketing team are totally aligned with, is that, sports and music are inextricably linked. And so we could be doing more in the music space. So just in the past year, we've done work with Diplo, with NF, with Eminem, just a new campaign with AGR, and just trying to continue to find Chica she wrapped our ESPN app campaign. So just continuing to not only find new artists, but relevant artists, and really work together. But that's certainly a way for us to be more relevant and to talk to a younger fan base, for sure.
Cool. Well, we have a few more minutes left, so I'm going to ask you guys a rapid question. This is the final question directed towards the both of you. Are younger athletes more involved and focused on building an online presence? Does social media act as a distraction for some athletes?
No. I mean, yes, they're involved, and yes, they're focused on it, but no, it's not a distraction. I think it's, as we talked about earlier, I think it's vital to their ability to share who they are with their fan base. And there's no reason that if it's such an important part of all of our lives, it shouldn't be an important part of their lives. So I think it's terrific.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think all roads lead to just more transparency, more accessibility. Again, the 24/7 nature of media, it's just absolutely a part of it all. So yeah, I mean, ideally, it doesn't ever become a distraction. I would think, though, some of these athletes, I know, Mike, you defend them, but a little bit worried about their persona, even more so.
For sure.
Yeah.
Just like the rest of us.
I guess so.
Of course. Well, thank you guys so much. One last thing I will ask, because we have 2 minutes and I want to use every single minute we have. What advice would you guys give the listeners out there who want to get started in the sports marketing business but don't know how?
Well, there's a lot of sports fans in this world, right? So just saying you're a sports fan is not going to quite cut it. So I always talk about, developing an expertise. For me, I came up through the ranks of, well, I got my MBA, but then also advertising. I worked at 2 different advertising agencies in New York City. And by the time I came to ESPN, I had spent a good amount of time working on big campaigns with big clients, doing, big things. And so I got my foot in the door because I was a really good marketer. And yeah, I love sports, but you can't really flip those around and be successful at some of these places that are, like I said, really competitive. So you got to build an expertise and a distinctiveness.
Yeah, I think to that end, Josh, to build on what Laura's saying, it is, thankfully, compared to what it was 28, 29 years ago when I started in this business, it's a big business. And there are a lot of different ways that you can fit yourself in. So understanding what you might want to do and what you might be good at is a really important thing to try and narrow your search a little bit, rather than to say, just want to work in sports. Well, there's Tom Brady's in sports and I can't do what he does. So I think learning as much as you can about the industry, whether it's through events like this or through podcasts or through, media of any kind, help you figure out where you might be able to fit yourself in and where your personality and skill set will best match, a role, and then going at that specifically.
Perfect. Well, thank you both, Laura and Mike. This was definitely great. I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you guys to everybody listening. And Caitlin, I will pass it back to you.
Thanks so much, Josh. Treat to be with you.
Thanks, Josh. And thanks, Mike and Laura. Josh, I second Laura's sentiment. Moderators don't always get to talk, but you could have had the floor with this crew as well. You did a phenomenal job. And it was really neat to see how your athletic experiences have informed all 3 of your professional lives. And Mike, I loved your thought that the work Laura is doing is telling the stories of current athletes, but also in giving them a lens into what their professional lives are going to look like when they become executives and decision makers. So thank you for that. And Laura, thank you for when you love something and there's a gap, you can't fail. So that's going to stick with us as well. Thank you guys for your time. We appreciate you. Josh, thanks again. Take care.
Let's go Duke.
I love it. Well,
I always wanted to say that.
That was a perfect way to close this out. Take care, Mike.